All right, I think we're live now.
We
Pete,
are,
thanks
sir.
for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Pete, so we mostly have customers listening and watching this, and uh, almost everybody I talk to is extremely skeptical about the IEEPA ruling, right? So uh, mostly what I hear is people just don't believe the Supreme Court will rule them illegal, and then people who think the Supreme Court might rule them illegal just don't think refunds are coming right now. I'm very skeptical guy myself in general, but I have a lot of faith in the Supreme Court, and it sounds like that's where we're headed. Now, I don't want this conversation to be about predicting the Supreme Court ruling outcome, but more I want to have a conversation around if that should happen, what are some practical things people can do, right? Now, you're probably the most followed voice in the industry on this topic, as far as I can tell. So, I'm very, very excited to talk to you about this. But I think to set the stage, can you maybe just in a few words describe or explain what this ruling actually is about?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the ruling and the reason why it's getting so much attention is pretty straightforward, folks. I mean, we've paid around $300 billion worth of IEEPA and fentanyl-related tariffs on imports that have come in from around the world, and it was done under a trade remedy, but it wasn't really a trade remedy. Most of you are familiar with the idea of tariffs, and we deal with tariffs every day. But there are other tariffs that are trade remedies, like the 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum, the 301 tariffs. IEEPA is a concept that was given to the president, which had never been used before, where in times of crisis, times of emergency, the president would be able to take action in order to assist the American citizen in ways that it would take the whole government force behind it to do something. Okay. So when these tariffs went into effect, the national emergencies that were that were provoked in this were a couple. One being the incredible number of Americans who have died from accidental, unintended fentanyl overdoses, and the second was the perception of critical damage that was happening to the American economy because of unfair trade practices by many of our political and economic rivals. Okay, so the question then became: was the use of IEEPA the proper methodology for handling these tariffs, for putting them out there, and for trying to get some kind of trade remedy? And that's where you have a lot of philosophical differences. So there are people who believe that the president under IEEPA has the power to do whatever he needs to do in order to address a national security. And there are those that say that there were other existing trade remedies that the president could have used: the 301s, the 232s, 122s, 338s. For those of you who aren't familiar with all of these, don't worry. Until like a year ago, nobody was. So these trade remedies, as they were prescribed, are more difficult to do. There's complications around them. The president has to ask for a study to be done, an investigation. That investigation takes time. Also, he's limited to what those tariffs can be. Under IEEPA, those constraints weren't there. He was able to put it in nearly immediately, which, for the shock and awe that was really hoped by the president and his team, was very effective. We all woke up one day and suddenly there were tariffs on practically everything from everywhere. And he was able to manipulate them up or down in order to leverage the massive size of the American economy to try to get certain countries to agree to certain deals. The Supreme Court case is really the result of two other cases that were heard in court. The first was by the Court of International Trade, who reviewed it and said, in the simplest terms possible, the president did not have the authority under IEEPA to put these tariffs into place. Now, there was all kinds of rejoicing. We were all very happy. But of course, within moments, the White House decided to appeal that. It went to the Circuit Court of Appeals, I think on July 28th, I think was the date. I don't remember exactly, in New York. And the Court of Appeals agreed with the CIT. They said that, the same thing. The president did not, under IEEPA, have authority to do this. So, wow, spoiler alert, the White House decides to take it to the Supreme Court. And now everybody's paying attention, because at the time, the best estimate was that there was around 160 to 170 billion dollars that could be impacted by this. And that was largely because The case was only focused on Mexico, Canada, and China. Well, the Supreme Court hears the case, and I'll be very honest with all of you. I've never listened to oral arguments in the Supreme Court. I've never done it. And, I did pretty good in civics, did pretty well in civics when I was in school. So I know it's a third of the government. You would have thought that someone whose life revolves around decisions by the government would have paid attention, but they just hadn't. It was incredible. The listening to the arguments was wonderful. How well prepared each and every single justice was, the questions that they asked, in particular, the comments that were made. And a couple of things came out of those oral arguments, one being that the Supreme Court seems skeptical of the government's case. And the second, of how difficult it would be to unwind this. And that's really where we are today. The arguments have been heard. It would be foolhardy for any of us to speculate on how the justices will decide, but a lot of people are speculating, myself included. And then the next big question is, okay, let's say it goes our way. Let's say that we wake up and Tariff Santa Claus has come down the chimney and we're all going to get presents. Wonderful. How on earth is that much money going to get refunded? And how difficult will it be? What are the likely courses for it to happen? And I guess that's why we're talking today.
Thanks, Pete. So one of the immediate questions that comes to mind is basically the countries that are affected. So I know these cases at CIT were specifically about China, Mexico, and Canada. Mm-hmm. But I've heard you say before that this is, this ruling is going to affect all IEEPA tariffs, right? Basically every country that, so how does that work if those countries aren't challenged? Is that like a direct sort of, if Supreme Court says IEEPA, was not legally used, therefore it shouldn't apply, does that automatically mean every country that was subject to it? Or is there some kind of a procedural thing that needs to happen?
So there's a three-part answer to that question, and they all have to do with cases and decisions that came from the CIT. The first is the Court of International Trade has said right up, just right out front, we are not going to limit refunds. If this is a situation where there are refunds, we will not stand in the way of refunds happening. The second interesting decision was one where the court said, rather than retry this under the same basis as what we just went through, we're going to say that all IEEPA tariffs fall under this and under this decision by the Supreme Court. If it's IEEPA and it was done, we're not going to sit here and retry it and waste the government's money and the importer's money.
It's like a precedent, basically, that would be applied instantly to.
That's a good way of putting it. Neither one of us are attorneys. I'm a failed comedian with a broker's license and a PhD in economics. So I'm doing the best I can, folks. But I'm trying to explain it in a way that all of us can understand. The precedent idea is a great way to look at it. Why would we just retry all of this? So they came out with a decision, and they said that the invalidation of IEEPA by the Supreme Court, we will direct that towards all other origins. And that was some excellent news. The third decision, which is pretty big, was when they said that there is an existing administrative process to get this money back that Customs has used for quite a long time through post-entry adjustment and protest. We're not going to get this wrapped up in court, which was interesting, right? Because for a long time, many of us, myself included, were saying that the liquidation period could really end up being a thorn in the side of importers, trying to figure out how we're going to get this back if the timing is off. You've got a very short window of time to do a post-entry adjustment. That's where someone made a mistake or someone got new information, so we're making a change. The protest is you have 180 days after liquidation. And liquidation, for those of you who don't know, is when the government says we're closing the file on this transaction. We're not looking at it anymore. You don't have to look at it anymore. Just keep all your records in case we have questions down the road. And you get 180 days to protest that decision. And 180 days, seems like a long time, but it really isn't when you think about the information you have to gather in order to get to the government in time. Being super honest with everyone, very few importers do little, if at all, any post-entry audit, very little. And even fewer have what I would consider to be even mediocre record keeping to pull what they need to do it. So 180 days isn't that long. And a lot of this stuff would have fallen out of that period. So the early days of this, back in April the 2nd, when I stopped trimming my beard, we had tariffs not long after that were in the 125, 145% range. The ones that were hit the hardest would probably not see a refund because they fall out of that window. The court said we will find a way to make every entry, every opportunity available to the importer, which leads most people to believe that they're going to extend the period past liquidation, where there'll be a period of time. For a lot of folks speculate, when you go to DC and you have a couple dozen Manhattans with people that know more than I do, they'll say to you that they wouldn't be surprised if it was 2 years, where you could gather the information, audit your entries, make sure it's correct, and submit it within that period. And the government has a statutory amount of time to respond, but it won't be that way. They'll be overrun with
Uh,
the refund requests. Sorry, go ahead.
Couple of notes on that. So, um, you've done many years, being a customs broker, so you know how this works. Like most importers have used different brokers, different forwarders, so the information's all over the place, right? It's not, I guess the larger ones tend to be more organized, but a lot of the medium and smaller ones, the very obvious thing is a lot of them have used multiple brokers.
Mhm.
So first of all, I can totally see how 18 months is not enough, right? Or yeah, basically 18 months. Is it 18 months? So you have 364 days for liquidation, and then another, I guess, a year and a half, right?
314 days or 341. I always mix those two up. And then
Yeah,
180 days past that. It's not a lot of time. No,
yeah.
which is why they're so
So if
important.
you're lucky, you have one organized broker and they have proper
Yeah.
record keeping, but you know, probably not, right?
Well, not
uh,
just that, it's not the broker's responsibility to keep the records. I mean, the broker keeps them for themselves, but the records are supposed to be kept by the importer, which in and of itself is a problem. I mean, most customs house brokers use an internal system, say CargoWise, or one that they've developed themselves, which does keep all the information, and that's great. But it's not the responsibility of the broker to keep those records. It's the responsibility of the importer. And you can't say, well, my broker's got them all. I'm begging all of you, if you're ever in an audit, that is not the response to where your records. My broker has them all. That will end in nothing but peril and disappointment for all of you. But
but Pete, in practical terms, I assume, and I say this as uh, I'm not a licensed broker, but I own a company that's a licensed broker. So uh, we kind of expect to be there when this is
yeah,
needed, right? So we have typically we would have like a entry summary, right? The commercial invoice packing list, any other documents that are, what are we talking about? Let's get into it. So let's say a typical audit. Let's not get into what IEEPA is yet, but
yeah.
a typical audit. What do you actually need to produce as an importer?
You're missing key elements in the brokerage file for an audit. There are two huge ones. The first is the purchase order. It is uncommon for the purchase order to be resident in the file. Why do we want a purchase order? Because it shows what the original negotiated price was, the conditions of the sale. That's all there. The second is the proof of payment. So the proof of payment, some sort of a proof in the transaction between the importer themselves and the bank that shows the amount that was actually paid to the foreign supplier. Because things go wrong, things change. It's not uncommon, right, for a 40-foot ocean container to show up at a warehouse, and because containers are made from garbage, there was a hole in it, and half of the boxes are wet, so now we have an insurance claim. Great. You work that out with your foreign supplier. But as a customs house broker, I don't know that. I made entry on the information available at time of entry. So I need those. The third piece, which is going to be crucial, is proof of payment of the duties. And think about that from a broker's perspective. A lot of your clients, I imagine, maybe even still now, expected you in that period to pay the tariffs on their behalf, and then they would pay you once you billed them. Well, now we've got to prove that the broker paid it and that you paid the broker for those tariffs. So there's two more transactions. It's not so much what I'm worried about in the middle of that entry, which, yes, many brokers are doing. It's the other parts associated with it. And then for companies that have jumped from broker to broker to broker to broker, they're going to have to go into ACE, pull all the information down to look at the filer number to see who filed on their behalf, contact them for that information. It's just going to add time to it and expense. But that's realistically where we're going to be if this were to happen the way we hope it does.
So Pete, let me just walk a little bit into that conversation from a different angle. First of all, I want to ask this question about the CIT and sort of postponing the liquidation date? Because last time you and I spoke, you were recommending, and I guess the industry consensus was that you should absolutely file a lawsuit with CIT
Yeah.
to essentially buy yourself more time on liquidation. Now you're no longer recommending that. I kind of get why. Can you explain though
Sure.
for everyone else to see
Yeah.
why that's no longer
Um,
necessary?
One of those decisions that came down from the CIT made it very clear we're going to use the administrative process. We're not going to do it through the courts. And they were very clear as well that they weren't going to impede refunds. And that was a big loss for the trade attorneys. The trade attorneys, I'm not going to name names, but you can look up the cases. They did everything they could to keep this in the court. For the same reason, I'm a broker, right? I would love to keep everything in administrative. So for me, if I could have done something to have gotten it all in my field, I absolutely would have. But lots of money was spent by the trade attorneys to try to force the CIT to use litigation, so that if you and I were importers, we would have our separate cases go to the CIT and they'd try them all at once. I mean, trade attorneys would have been buying their kids summer houses on those fees, their grandkids probably. That's how much it would have cost to do. But the CIT's made it clear that that's not going to be the recommended process when the Supreme Court asked for help. And that's something we haven't talked about, Robert, but I'm going to bring it up. The Supreme Court is unlikely to tell the CIT if they side with the importers how to do the administrative refunds. They're very bright people, but the CIT is established to deal with things like this. And in the past, that's what they've done. They've said to the CIT, here's our ruling. You go figure it out. We're done here. We've told you that we're not going to agree to these tariffs. Now you need to figure out how that money gets back to people.
So whatever basically CIT said until now, that you expect that to be how it moves forward.
I do indeed, sir.
Okay. All right. So I kind of want to get into sort of like almost like a decision tree, right? What are some possible ways this can go? And then you kind of touched on that. So I guess option, the first thing that's possible very clearly is that the Supreme Court just doesn't rule against IEEPA tariffs and they stand. And is that kind of end of story? Is that the end of the road, or what
If
happens after that?
So if the government says we're not going to rule against these tariffs, is that what you're asking? We disagree
Yes.
with more courts, the tariffs stay in place. They're going to have to say why.
No, I'm sorry. Let's just make sure the question is clear. Let's say the Supreme Court makes a ruling that upholds the tariffs.
Upholds the lower court cases or upholds the tariffs?
No, they rule against the CIT.
Okay.
I guess the
Yep, that's where I was going.
ruling, right?
That's where I was going. So if they say that, they have to say why.
Okay.
This is so sticky. What the court probably doesn't want to do is give some sweeping decision about presidential powers. What they don't want to do is in some massive decision say, and here are the reasons that IEEPA can't be applied here, because what they would essentially be doing is determining precisely what IEEPA can be used for. And it appears from court watchers that that's not something they want to do. All right. So they have to say why. So they'll strike it. They'll strike down the agreements of the lower courts, and they'll say this is the legal reason why we don't agree with it. Well, what that does is it opens up additional cases. It opens up additional cases to say the reason that the court chose not to uphold these tariffs was incorrect. We're going to ask the question this way. Again, trade attorneys get involved.
Changing the reason, basically.
The reasoning for it. So one of the reasons we don't think that we've gotten an answer yet on this is because they're trying to come up with the reason why or against they've made this decision. So what is the legal basis we're going to use to apply this decision, either to strike down the tariffs or to allow them to continue? So if they say we're disagreeing with the lower courts, we're going to keep these tariffs in place, tariffs stay in place until another legal challenge happens. And then having your stuff in front of the CIT and having that case done will probably have some utility. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see a refund on them.
So, okay, so the second option is possible outcome is that they do side with the lower court ruling and say, okay, yes, the president didn't have the powers. What happens then? I guess they send it back to the lower court, or is there another sort of
All
division
kinds.
there? And can they just say, all right, we're not even gonna send it to lower court. We're just gonna force the government
Yeah, the
to
Supreme Court's
refund?
called the Supreme Court for a reason, right? They are going to make a decision, and they can say what they. So they could very well say, we are we are invalidating the tariffs in the past. We agree with the lower courts. However, and the however is the scary word. It's possible that the Supreme Court could say, we don't recommend, or we're not allowing for refunds to happen. Just moving forward, there won't be any tariffs. There's a huge problem with that, a huge legal problem with that. If a tax has been determined to be illegal, you can't say that there's no do-over here. You were charged a tax. You were charged a trade remedy that has been seen to be illegal. Therefore, the government owes you some sort of recompense, right? They could also say, or the CIT could say, we're not going to give refunds. What we're going to do instead is we're going to give you guys credit. So for your future imports, you're going to have a pool of money already paid that you can pull from. I want you to imagine, as a customs house broker, what a goat rodeo that will be. You'll have to update ACE, ACH, that pool of money that's out there. What happens if you never import again, right? Are you allowed under some condition to get that money back? Probably not. This creates another big nasty mess that would have to be dealt with. The third would be, we don't believe that the import community was harmed. We don't think that XYZ Corporation, who paid an additional $10 million in tariffs, was really harmed because they passed those tariffs on to their customers. Their customers were the injured party. So we're not giving
But this
anyone
is
back.
but this
Go
is
ahead.
assuming it's sent to CIT, and this is basically CIT ruling this,
No,
or are you saying the Supreme
the
Court could
Supreme
also make
Court.
it?
The Supreme Court could
Okay.
say these unbelievable, terrible things that give me nightmares, right? And imagine. So now I'm getting all fired up, Robert. So imagine the court says that the importers weren't injured unless they can prove that they didn't pass those tariffs on. Okay, that's a forensics exercise. My team will figure that out. But now, for the people who did pass on the tariff to their customers, that means that 360 million Americans have the right to sue the government for their money back, because you're saying I was the injured party. So I want Amazon to give me back the 14 cents that was paid in additional tariffs on my socks because I shouldn't have paid them. Are we going to have a class action suit for 360 million Americans to get our money back? It seems unlikely, which is why most people believe the courts will say, settle this with the importers, let the importers figure out how they're going to manage it. Because if I'm importing something that I sell to my customer and I tell them, hey, listen, Jack, I'm sorry, this went up by 50%, I got to raise it by 50%. They can work it out with me about how we do a refund. And then they can work it out with their customers, which will probably create even more lawsuits. Hallelujah, send your kid to law school. But that kind of a mess seems unlikely to occur. They don't want to create more work. They're trying to find a way to limit the work. So
Okay.
let's limit it by giving it back to importers.
Yeah, I mean that's a very obvious issue, right? I mean we've heard from many of our customers that early on when the tariffs were announced, they try to pass them on, and you know big retailers especially they just weren't agreeing to it. Like
Right.
I've heard many cases where tariff went up to 46%, and then Walmart or Home Depot or somebody, they were like, nope, 10% is all you're getting. But in the end they did get it's essentially passed on, right? So but it makes sense that the court would potentially say, all right, you guys go figure it out, because we can't, there's no, like, procedurally it's not possible to audit all of this and issue refunds to all these different parties.
That
uh,
becomes a contract law question too. So I would ask the importers who are currently watching, did you have an agreement in your contract that said you would share the recovery? Was there anything that was in there? I've seen some where there were. And then suppliers too. I have a lot of clients who work something out with their suppliers. Said, you guys are going to have to
yep.
take a haircut. We'll take part of it. You take part of it. So now what happens? Are the suppliers going to be asking for their money too? That's not my world, thank God. I'm just going to get you the money back. All right. You worry about how you distribute it after the fact, man. That's more work than I got to deal with.
Yeah, no, that's I mean that's it's fascinating just watching. I hope we get to watch all of this happen, because it's just, as a logistician, as a fan of the Supreme Court, and an armchair sort of fake attorney, this is all very exciting.
It is very
Yeah,
exciting.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of getting into um, a little bit of sort of preparation, right? Because I'm sure you've probably seen, and values of imported goods have changed a lot, right?
Mhm.
So you've had importers that were declaring, $50,000 for a shipment. All of a sudden, values were decreasing. Now, some of it's probably because there was pressure on the suppliers to, sort of pay some of the tariff, essentially, right? But then there's probably a lot of that happening where it's just under declared, right? So when we're getting into sort of your territory here.
Yep.
How do you, how do you deal with this? Because on one hand, this was the whole purpose, basically, of the tariffs to say, because we've heard many times China pays the tariff. So if your product value went down all of a sudden, then technically China paid the tariff. But in reality, like, how do you prove that any of this is real? How do you prove that not, how much of it is real? Um, what's the prudent thing to do at this point?
Going to give you two answers on that. The first is I feel desperately sorry for companies that said to their supplier, let's just do it DDP. Supplier's like, yeah, I got you, man. I mean, we're going to work it out. Don't worry about it. I've been auditing entries where the unit cost of something before they went DDP was, say, $100. And then it went DDP, and I've gotten the information from the supplier, and suddenly the value's like 40. I wonder how that happened. I've been doing customs valuation as my main job for over 30 years. And man, I've done some voodoo and some witchcraft to manage entered value. Never seen anybody drop it by 60%. And that is going to be a red flag to customs. They're going to ask a lot of questions about that. Why is it that your supplier suddenly is making, they have a 60% 60% margin? Because we're looking at other HTSs for similar companies, and theirs is more like 12. What's going on here? And they're going to go after that foreign supplier when they try to get their refunds on the IEEPA tariffs. It's going to come to light, and that importer that gave it over to DDP, that American company, their name is the notified party on the documents. That's the part no one's paying attention to. So Pete Mento Corporation says to my supplier, yeah, man, go for it. And now I'm suddenly not paying more than I was before. Any reasonable person would ask questions about basis of appraisement. But I'm on the documentation as the notified party. So if there's a fraud investigation, I'm getting a phone call to ask me questions about, did I have a reasonable understanding of the changes to basis of appraisement? That is going to be an ugly conversation. And yes, a lot of these foreign suppliers are playing, stupid reindeer games with their valuation strategies, and they had a lot to gain from it. But they're going to lose their right to import. They're going to be sanctioned. They're going to end up getting fines and penalties. Now it's Chinese suppliers will just go across the street and change the name, but the fact remains there will be some upcomings for what they've done.
So, Pete, in a lot of cases, there was legitimate revisions to uh, the value and how value is calculated. I can think of a number of examples that I've had to. I was involved in those conversations. Things like uh, like a country of origin rule that may you know you may have product that qualifies for two different treatments, and you make a decision based on like, let's call it legitimate tariff optimization or duty optimization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, it's not all black and white, right? There are cases where you maybe didn't pay attention to the country of origin rules because it had no bearing on the tariff because they were all duty free, and now all of a sudden, um, you want the preferential treatment, and now you go and review your country of origin rules, and then you end up with a different sort of
Mm-hmm.
classification, different country of origin, different tariffs, done legitimately, right? So, what do you make of that? Like, how do you deal with that? How do you?
Yeah. Well, you got two issues that you need to immediately address. The first is, let's say it's legitimate. Let's say that for 20 years you were importing under a certain basis of appraisement. Turns out you look through it and you see a legitimate way to control your entered value. First sale program, properly using selling agent agreements where the seller's agent no longer pardon me, buying agent is their commission is now duty free. Transportation costs under CIF. There's all kinds of things that can be used. Well, now you're saying to the government, all that stuff I did the past 10 years was wrong. I'm doing it right now. If you don't realize that customs is going to look at all the old stuff and say, at what point were you lying to me? Are you lying to me now? Or are you lying to me then? If you make a substantial change to classification, country of origin, valuation, the list goes on, you need to take the time to also do a prior disclosure for your past entries for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is they might have a bunch of your money you want to get back if it was correct. The second half to the answer to this question is, it reminds me of Yul Brynner in the Ten Commandments. So it is written, so it shall be done. Show me the memo that you put together that's with your compliance information that was reviewed and validated by leadership at the company, that you made this decision consciously with intention. You did the work to determine it and be able to show your work. Because if customs disagrees with you, it's a lot like calculus in college. You might have gotten the answer wrong, but you did the work to get there. They might go a little easier on you. But if it's just something where you did a little math on the back of a napkin and decided to change everything, you're just asking for trouble. Show me the written memo that you did that was codified and agreed upon by leadership. And then I'm going to feel a little more confident in it. Or by an outside party, attorney, customs broker, consultant, your Aunt Rita, whatever. But have someone else who's told you that this is the correct way to go.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're saying basically be prepared, right? Be prepared for an audit of each entry. Is that kind of what you expect?
Always, brother. Always.
No, I mean, for sure. I'm just saying, auditing $400 billion worth of entries. That's like because a regular post summary correction takes, I don't know, the refund takes like a year. So this is, we're talking potentially many years for this, but that's if they process everything like they process a post summary correction, which is not really an audit. Now your position is that you expect that every entry will be actually audited.
Yes. And so this is the great thing about living in Washington, D.C. I am surrounded by hypocrisy, right? It's like being in love with a narcissist. Everything that you do is wrong is okay if they do it. I've had a lot of therapy, Robert, a lot of time to reflect. So the government has told us, the import community, you as an operative customs house broker, my clients that are importers, you need to be wary of the use of artificial intelligence. If you give me an answer that came from AI, I'm going to question the validity of it and whether or not that was reasonable care. At the same time, the government's going to use artificial intelligence to audit all of these entries because they don't have nearly enough people. So on one side of their mouth, they're going to say, now listen, it's not okay for you to do AI because we don't trust you and your AI, but trust us. We're going to use AI to audit all of these things. It's cool. It's going to be fine. Don't freak out. I mean, that level of hypocrisy can only be done at the governmental level, but it's what we're going to see. They're going to go through all of those entries in the only cost-effective, efficient way they know how, which is the use of data elements and large language models. It makes sense. But if we do that, we're going to get in trouble.
So basically, the expectation is that they're going to use some kind of AI models to compare sort of trends and things like that and spot, whatever looks weird. But wouldn't that mean that they would at least prioritize the weird and the outliers and things like that?
Absolutely. But they're going to be told by AI which ones are weird. I'll give you a great example. You paid IEEPA tariff on something that was also subject to another tariff, 301s, let's say, right? Anti-dumping, countervailing. They're going to see whether or not you properly applied those tariffs as well. Or if it's a stacking situation where you pay IEEPA and 232 on the derivatives, did you properly apply the 232 tariff for steel and aluminum on the derivative? They're going to ask questions about that. So here you are, don't forget, folks, you're surrendering your entry to the government and saying, please find something wrong. But if you don't, give me my bag of money. They're going to look. They're going to really look to see if you did anything wrong. And if you did do something wrong, they're going to put a big red denied stamp on your claim. And it's going to be followed with a Customs Form 28 asking for more information about the other thing you screwed up. Which is why we're not going to put a single entry in front of the government until a human being has audited it from front to back. And yeah, that takes time, but it's worth it. because I don't want to have to call a client back and say you didn't get your money back because we missed a mistake in your entry. Brokers make mistakes. I know it's hard to believe because we're pretty fabulous people, but we do make mistakes. We're human beings. And think about all the work that's been added to a broker's desk in the past 10 months. Additional lines to Chapter 99s, the valuation for derivatives to understand the proper duty. I mean, it's wrought with opportunities for peril, folks, to have mistakes there. So I just I don't trust it.
So Pete, is that let's get into what your job is today, right? What does Baker Tilly do? So and how you can support this community. So are you basically reviewing the entries before anything's presented to the government? Is that kind of the main function of what's your department?
What makes us different than everyone else, and I'll die on this hill. I had a pretty good job before I came here, folks. I ran customs for the largest transportation company on planet Earth. You know, it's global director of customs, commercial side, and it was a great job, and I loved working there, and I loved the people. I miss them every day. But when I saw the opportunity for refunds, I knew that I was going to have to go somewhere that was going to manage it correctly. Because here's the rub: we will pull all the necessary information. We'll get everything that we need, and we're going to review everything about it. So a customs house broker won't be able to tell you if it's a related party, if your transfer price was properly adjusted. That takes people that do transfer pricing every day. We have a team that will review your transfer pricing for related parties. They're also not going to help you with the tax side of things. If you bring back $1 million of duties, that means that you overpaid or that you oversold your goods in the state. So now you have a possible state income tax recovery, excise tax, franchise tax, federal income tax. I know a lot of customs house brokers. Many of them I would trust to do an entry all day long, but I'm not trusting them to do my taxes. So there's a follow-on of other refund opportunities that come from this that you're going to have the right person for. Before anything goes into a client, all the data gets uploaded to our system, all the paperwork gets uploaded to our system from the brokers. More than one, two, or three, we don't care. And then individuals will review them. They will audit them from purchase order through payment, both payments, to make sure that everything aligns. They will review every 232 valuation. They will look at the 301 ways the tariffs were put in, all of it. And then we will make a recommendation to go or no go on the refund. If there were tons of problems, doesn't mean we're not going to go for the money. First, we're going to do a prior disclosure. We're going to tell the government, these are mistakes that were made. We're telling you about them. Here's the money we owe you or the money you owe us for making the mistake. And then once that's sent in, then we'll protest to get the money back. This is going to be outrageously complicated. And I live for outrageously complicated. It's why I'm going to be single forever. I love the minutia, okay? But this minutia in particular, there's billions of dollars in the balance, and then follow on billions more on the tax side. This is not something you give an attorney or a customs house broker. And beyond all of that, I can't speak to your brokers, but where I came from, they were overworked to the point of exhaustion because of the changes that would happen. For those of you that are importers, please go hug a customs house broker because they're going through it. It's a job that we pride ourselves on being accurate. And when you begin to add a bunch of other elements that constantly change because the government is just suffering from schizophrenia and every day they're changing something, it forces us to try to change with it. Mistakes were going to be made. In an industry where there aren't already enough people to do the day-to-day work, you're going to dump all that responsibility on them, or go to a trade attorney who they're great when you're in trouble, but at $350 an hour, I don't want them auditing my entries. So most of our work is done on contingency. We take a percentage of the recovery, but we take care of it. You just sit back and watch us do our work, which we will do with tremendous alacrity. It will be a sight to behold. If this happens, man, there'll be no vacations. There'll be no time off. It's just going to be probably 2 years of
it's going to be war.
Yeah, and it's going to be a war because they're going to say no. They're going to say no to $1 million of possible refunds, and I'm going to march my tubby butt up to the Reagan building, and I'm going to fight these guys. I'm going to fight. We all will. Your brokers will. Your importers will, right? There's too much at stake. Think about the anger and the rage from this community when those tariffs started. What's about to be pointed in the opposite direction. And I'm here for it, man. Come at me, bro. I can't wait.
Baker Tilly is a big name, Pete. So what's a customer size that, what's the smallest duty amount that you would?
Oh, I'm talking to customers that have 10 grand. I don't care. This is personal, Robert. All right. Like,
Well, I guess the work involved is also proportional, right? So 10,000 in tariffs means maybe like an hour of audits, right, or 2 hours of audit or something like that.
maybe what if that $10,000 in refunds is 100 entries I've got to audit? I'm losing money on that, right? But there could be other work in there on the tax side that could be more beneficial than that. So that's why we look at every one of these individually. And if there's a small importer out there, let's say they've got like 10 entries and it's $10,000 of refunds, just follow the process. Audit it yourself. Take a weekend off from going to the ball game and do the audit from start to finish. Gather all the necessary information, put together a pretty package, give it to your customs house broker, and say, now file this. If it's big though, I just can't imagine companies are ready for that.
So, but that's a good segue into what can companies do now, right? Like practical terms. We have no ruling, right? So you don't want to go out and spend $100,000 on work that may not be relevant, right? So, but what's something that you can start to do now?
Number one thing to do: pull your ACE report. So it shocks me when I meet an importer who doesn't have an ACE portal account because we paid for it with our taxes. It's not the best system, but it's not bad. And it gives you access to all the information of your importing for the past 5 years.
So the number one thing to do is open an ACE account.
ACE account. If you don't have one, if you do, start pulling your importer activity reports, and then sort it to point out all the entries where you paid an IEEPA tariff. That's all, and that's pretty straightforward, right? And then you know the total universe of possible refunds. So get access. Once you have access, pull the report. Once you pull the report, understand the universe of possible recovery. Then comes the harder part, from my opinion, which is begin to gather a file folder, physical or virtual, of all the necessary documents to do a real line audit, from purchase order through payment, and get them all in one place. There's no reason why they can't be electronic. A lot of what you need, your broker probably has resident in their system. You just have to access it and pull it. And then create a workflow. Go for the ones that would liquidate the fastest, just in case that becomes a problem. And then from the ones that liquidate the fastest, go to the biggest possible opportunity for refund, and really just audit it meticulously, looking for every single possible thing that could go wrong. Once that's done, you need to create a memo of what we're doing. For the ones that you're comfortable with pursuing a refund, there needs to be a memo of this particular case. What happened on July the 1st, 2026? We made a time. We had a time where we put together these refund processes. Here's why. Here's the basis for doing it. Here's the regulatory reason behind it. And then put that into your compliance manual for refund events. Because in an audit, customs is probably going to pull some of these entries where a refund happened. They might ask you about how you did it and why you did it. So have it all there. And then constantly audit. It's such a good behavior. It's such a great habit to audit your entries. Once you've done this and gotten the refund, you might notice things that aren't necessarily correct or you have questions about. We'll start pulling more entries and asking more questions. And I know it can be a lot of work, but it's very rewarding, not only for possible refunds, but also in the future to remain compliant. None of this matters if you're not compliant, folks. It's great to get the money back. I know we're all very excited and hopeful, but your first job needs to be maintaining compliance. Use a good broker that cares about you, takes the time to train you, like we're doing right now, and lean on them when you have questions, and take that as an opportunity to get it done right. You'll find the brokerage community is extremely generous with their time to try to help you do things correctly.
Yeah, to their detriment, right? Historically, Pete, I think. But that's a good point, right? As you were speaking, I was thinking, our plat. Not this is not a plug at all, but we do have a dashboard that as a customer you can access all your entry package, right? The things that we do have as a broker. And obviously going back 5, 6, 7 years, but we also have the option for customers, for importers, to upload documents, their own documents. So you can actually have, you have a repository already. This is true for a number of brokers, especially the bigger ones, where you do have a portal. You can log in, you can see your shipments, you can see your documents, and all you got to do is start uploading these additional documents to each file, right? Your purchase order, payment, proof of payments, and things like that. and at least now you have an infrastructure for that instead of maybe trying to recreate it from scratch. Uh, so yeah, definitely food for thought for us as well to work with our customers to kind of help them get started. Uh, and a great point on compliance, right? This is now the biggest incentive you could ever imagine for importers to you know audit and look into compliance, because now potentially $400 billion to reward this behavior.
306 so far. We'll see where it goes from there.
Speaking as interest payments,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Interest as well. This is gonna be a whole bunch of checks Uncle Sam's gonna be writing if this goes that way.
Now, one thing we all noticed in the industry is the move by CBP to say you have to have an ACH account to get refunds now. I understand this was a long time coming, but all of a sudden happening now a few weeks ago. Do you interpret that as a sign of things to come, or?
Totally. Think about what it costs to transact a check by the government.
It's
Write a
probably a
check.
few cents, right? At least.
Yeah. And you've got millions of them that are going to be going out. So this is a long time coming. People have wanted this to happen. And it also sets up something beautiful, which will be quarterly. Eventually, we're going to have quarterly ACH payments for PMS. So rather than paying at the time of entry, you get a month and then 15 days. Imagine you have one tariff cost every quarter, excuse me. So you're really making 4 payments. That's cheaper for the government. It's better for you. It keeps the money in your account. Eventually going to annual, let's say. A boy can dream. But this sets that up for us to do. And if you haven't set up ACH refunds yet, you need to get on that. That's the only way you'll get your money back.
So you do think that this was done in preparation for
You.
a potential positive rule?
This was the kick in the backside to get them to do it, was the work that would be on the outside of this.
Okay. All right. Pete, how do importers work with you guys? What's the process typically? Is it there's an email to Pete, or they go for their broker, or?
You can hit me up at pete.mento@bakertilly.com or contact you guys. You can get you in touch with us. We don't get paid if you don't get paid.
Okay.
It's not like I'm showing up saying who wants a bag of angry badgers. I'm saying who wants a bag of money, and we'll take part of it if we're successful. If we're not successful, we don't get paid.
All right. Sounds good, Pete. Thanks a lot for all the insights. I know you. It sounds like you maybe getting a lot of drinks with people in the know, and
I love my job.
Any last thoughts, Pete, for listeners here?
Yeah. I mean, I know it's been very hard. I know it's been an extremely difficult and trying time for all of us. There is some hope on the other end of this, but don't take for granted that it will be easy. That's the first. The second is this is an opportunity for us to point out how having a great compliance program can be weaponized in times like this, monetized in times like this. All that hard work that many of you have done to have your compliance manuals, to have your record keeping, to have people who knew what they were doing, this is when it pays off. Most companies don't bother to make that investment, but the people who did are about to really reap the rewards. So congratulations on that. And it really does validate the hard work that this whole community does. Yesterday was Global Customs Day, and I know I didn't get any flowers at work, but I hope that some of you did get recognized for the hard work we do every day.
Yeah, I saw you post about it, and I was working from home yesterday, but I was gonna come and give people a hug here, but I guess I'll do that right after.
I love how everyone is working behind you. Like, did you say to them, about to be on? No one looked like they're messing about. This is a serious business. I want everybody working behind you.
Honestly, Pete, they don't know. I don't think they know we're streaming live, but this is my favorite spot because that's the hardest working team over there. So
that's excellent. I love it.
All right. I think we have a couple of questions. Let's just try to maybe answer a couple of them. Will CBP be cooperating with the entries at origin when doing the audits? I think there's this. I don't know if I understand it correctly. Does CBP have access to sort of origin export declarations?
No, they're going to come to the importer and say, you have to get this information for us. And given the current political environment, I sincerely doubt that the Chinese Ministry of Revenue is going to say, here's all our information. Thank you so much. Possible, but highly unlikely. They'll be asking you for that information and they'll make you track it down. And when you can't, it's another excuse to deny your claim.
Okay. So, all right, is that basically that's a question about valuations, I assume, right? What's reported on exports. Okay. Yeah, that's not something I've seen. I've seen that happen in other countries where, you know, there's a bunch of countries that will look at export declarations. US is not one of them.
Well, Mexico and Canada will give the information to U.S. Customs. So that's one place where it could happen.
Okay. All right. But typically not something that the U.S. is, U.S. Customs are looking into.
We're not exactly on everybody's favorite friend list right now. So I don't see that happening.
All right. And luckily, I guess we backed off of Greenland. So that's not, that was going to be another big thing that depended on this ruling, right? So
until you see an executive order followed by a Federal Register notice, followed by a CSMS, don't freak out. Until you see it in writing, don't freak out.
Okay. Pete, thanks again. Pleasure as always. And, you know, hopefully we'll be in touch with you with some of our importers to kick things off.
Happy to help. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye now.